Welcome to Today we'll consider how to add, subtract positive and negative numbers. What's another name for those numbers? Integers. So let's jump into it. Here's how I think of a positive 11. I think of a positive 11 as a happy thing. Positive 11 means that you have 11 units of positivity going here. Let's see what those 11 units look like. Yeah, look at all this positivity floating around this person here. All that just boils down to what I would call positive 11. Let's do another example. Here is just positive 3. Let's see what that looks like. Well, positive 3, a little more gentle positivity than 11. This is what I think of as positive 3. Just 3 positives. Not so big a smile, but hey, still to the positive. Now, what do I think of as 0? Here's a 0 to me. Not particularly sad, not particularly happy, just kind of even. That's a 0 to me. Here's what I think of as negative 4. Not hugely negative, but yeah, this looks pretty negative here. Let's see what we've got here with our negative 4. We have 4 units of negativity going on here for this person. Here's what a negative 9 looks like. And of course we can get more and more negative from there. It gets ugly. Surrounded by negativity. So, in general, we're going to think about the positivity or negativity of numbers as being, in a sense, positive and negative moods. And here you can see a good demonstration indicated by negative and positive numbers called integers. Now let's look at the effect of this kind of imagery. What happens when a negative joins a positive? Here's a negative and a positive. This is a unit of negativity. This is a unit of positivity. When they come together, they produce a kind of a black blob. That's 0. Anytime we have a black blob like that, that's 0. It's a result of negative and positive coming together. So if we were to put this into symbols, we would say negative 1 plus positive 1 equals 0. When they come together and are combined, they make a 0. We're going to use this fact a lot as we go forward. Let's look at another example. Here's a happy person. This person has 5 positives. And suddenly, her hand gets cut, which brings on the effect of 3 negatives into her mood. 3 negatives are added into her mood. When that happens, these negatives combine with 3 of the positives, and those all turn to zeros. These all turn to zeros. The net effect is we have a positive 2. What does this look like when I write the mathematics for it? We have positive 5 plus, combined with, a negative 3, and when that happens, the net outcome is a positive 2. Let's look at another example. This is one example of 2 ways to lower moods. We can lower moods this way. Remove positives. So, if someone has positives around them, give this person 4 positives, and we want to lower their mood, we can remove positives. That's called subtracting positive. There's another way we can lower moods, though, when someone has 4 positives around them, and that is by adding negatives. If we bring negatives in, what happens? Immediately, those react, create zeros, and we have 2. So, the way we would write each of these is that when we start with 4, a positive 4 start out, we then add a negative 2. The net result is a positive 2. That's one way to lower a mood, and we saw earlier that if we start with the same positive 4 and simply subtract 2, we'll still end up with a positive 2. 2 ways to lower moods: subtract positive, add negative to what's already there. Let's look now at how we can raise moods. Guess what? 2 ways. A negative 7. Boy, we certainly want to raise this mood. What can raise that mood? We can add something to raise that mood. Let's add a positive 3. What happens there? These 3s come in, swoop in there. These positives swoop in there. Turn parts of that mood to zeros. And we're left with a negative 4. That mood has raised. Going from negative 7 to negative 4 is a raised mood. There's another way to raise the mood. Let's look at this. We start with the negative 7. We subtract something. What can we subtract? We can subtract negative 3. we will still get a raised mood. So there are two ways to lower moods, two ways to raise moods. Let's see how this all works into some situations. Let me portray this person with basically no mood. Here's how we can keep this person in a zero mood. This person has lots of zeros floating around. I'm going to portray 0 minus 3, positive 3. What happens when you go 0 minus positive 3? Let's see what that looks like. We remove 3 positives from this situation. 0 minus positive 3 is negative 3. So we can even subtract positive from nothing, and we get an answer negative. Or we could take this same situation where this person is in a zero mood, and we could remove 3 negatives from this situation. Let's try that. Negatives are reds, and lo and behold, we end up with 3 positives. So it's possible to remove negatives and positives even from a zero situation. Let's look at another more vivid example of that. Here's a person in a negative mood. This person has several negatives floating around, 5, but has a few zeros floating around too. Those zeros float around like flies. They can be around anywhere at all. People always have zeros floating around them. Anytime we want, we can have lots of zeros floating around. And sometimes even when we don't want, they'll float around. So, what do we have here? We have a negative 5 situation. Those zeros don't make any difference. But then, what happens if I subtract from that situation 3 positives? Easy enough to do. The situation goes even more negative. And we end up with negative 8. This is an example of where we can even subtract positive from negative numbers, and we end up with something even more negative. Let's look at a situation where we start with positivity instead. Let's start with a positive situation. This time I'm going to simply write the situation first. Here's a situation that I'll just simply write. We start with a positive 3. We're going to remove from that situation that's something that it seems that we couldn't remove. We're going to remove negative 5 from that situation. How can we do that when there's only positivity? Well, even when we're in a positive 3 mood, we must have some negatives still left. After all, we still have to go to school or work tomorrow when we don't want to, whatever. There still can be some negativity even when you're in a positive 3 mood. Let's remove 5 negatives from that positive 3 situation. How would that work? Let's take a look. Here's our person in a fairly positive mood. 3 positives floating around. We're going to remove 5 negatives, but let's be aware that we can have lots of zeros floating around this person. They're still in a positive 3. Let's give this person some zeros. So that person is still in a positive 3 mood. Those zeros are flying around everywhere like flies, but who cares? The person is in a positive 3. We're going to remove 5 negatives from this situation. 1 negative removed, 2nd negative removed, 3rd negative removed. There they are, the ones that have been removed. 4th, 5th. The answer to this, as you can see, is a positive 8. So removing negative from any situation, as I said earlier, raises the mood. So anytime we have a situation where there are numbers being added or subtracted, they're integers, either positives or negatives, we have the choice of starting with the first number, any number we want, like negative 10. We can do anything we want, add. We might want to add 7. And we see that we have the effect of positives counterbalancing negatives. 7 of these counterbalance 7 of those, and we end up with simply negative 3. That's the story. All number problems, all number questions involving positives and negatives and adding, subtracting can be treated as simply a statement of, I start my day in such and such mood, something is added or subtracted from it, the mood rises or falls, and I end up with an answer. Using this visualization, you can quickly come up with the correct answer and not through a bunch of memorized rules that often are forgotten. That's your lesson for today on adding, subtracting, positive, negative, integers. Thanks.